I'm Julie Bartke with this Senate update. An $11 billion finance package directed towards roads, bridges, and transit was debated by the full Senate on Monday. Senator Scott Dibble's transportation funding package includes provisions such as a 6.5% sales tax increase on the price of gasoline at the wholesale level, a newly created $25 late fee per month for vehicle registrations capped at $100, and it also increases the metro area transit sales tax. Just before members voted on the bill, several Republican senators stood up to discuss their opposition to the legislation.
If this bill passes this afternoon, we're going to have the third highest gas tax in the country, and we're going to have the highest gas tax in the Midwest. We've had much discussion, members, this session about the Better Trucks Initiative. It's a bill that was authored by Senator Jensen, Senate File 309, that would have raised the amount of weight that a truck, commercial vehicle, can haul on Minnesota state highways. Members, your support of this bill is going to take us up to the highest price per gallon in the Midwest, and we're going to have the lowest truck weights in the Midwest. It's an awful combination, members, to be the highest state in the Midwest with the highest gas tax and the lowest truck weights. In fact, this combination is so awful that this body, in their wisdom, has already made exceptions to the heavier trucks weights in this state. We know that right now, if you're involved in the timber industry, that you don't need to abide by those rules. We know now if you're involved in agriculture, you don't need to abide by those heavy truck weights rules. In fact, even this body just last year voted to expand our truck weights in the state of Minnesota to full freight in one DOT district. You may recall Senator Skoye's district was successful in bringing to this body just last session full freight truck expansion of the weights to MnDOT District number 4 in the northern west central part of this state. Members, I would argue that it's working well. One of the things that would allow these Minnesota's economy relating to these industries certainly would be a huge economic benefit. This bill offered local control. That's one of the deceptions that's been going around this building and this body on this particular issue. This bill absolutely, because it's tied into the agricultural section, the current agricultural exception we have for truck weights right now allows your local governments at the county level to veto or to not allow those trucks to operate in that capacity. This particular bill offered safer roads, allowing more axles, more brakes per pound of weight on our Minnesota highways, and certainly offered cost savings that this body is not moving forward. We heard testimony in committee from one road builder that he could have offered a 4.5% savings to that municipality that built that road. One of the other handouts I sent out to you was an article written to the St. Cloud Times that talked about how another road builder would offer on a regular basis about a 5% savings to those road projects. Members, the single biggest user of aggregates in the state of Minnesota for road construction is our municipalities, whether that be the township, the county, the state, or our federal roadways. The other side, you'll see in that same article down towards the bottom, an example cited in terms of the demolition of the Metrodome. The fact is that there was 50,000 truckloads of recycled concrete that came out of that site when the Metrodome was demolished and torn down. Members, if you could have increased the truck weights on those vehicles just 10%, you would have had 5,000 less vehicles on our highways coming out of downtown Minneapolis. You would have burned tens of thousands of gallons less of diesel fuel. and certainly put our roadways in better shape than they are now. That's the type of savings, and that's the type of economic impact that this bill would have had it had a chance to be included.
I'm amazed. I really am. The DFL legislature and the governor last biennium raised taxes $2 billion, the largest tax increase in state history. Those taxes led to a $2 billion surplus. $2 billion surplus. And despite what the governor says, that is overtaxation above what the state needs. And so what's the reaction? The first reaction is we need more taxes for transportation. We have a $2 billion surplus. We have overtaxed the state of Minnesota $2 billion. And after the largest tax increase in state history, the legislature and the governor did not make transportation a priority at that time. And so now we're here saying we need more for Minnesota families and small businesses. As Senator Peterson said, $1.9 billion on top of the $2 billion that we already taxed. Now the advocates will say we need a dedicated source of revenue. We're the legislature. We dedicate those taxes. It's up to us to say what's a priority. We shouldn't be going back to Minnesota families. We shouldn't be asking for a new gas tax, a new sales tax, and new fees, all of which hit low and middle income Minnesotans the hardest. We should be taking care of ourselves within the budgets that we have, just like our Minnesota families and small businesses are. So members, I encourage you to vote against this bill.
I would like to remind Minnesotans that when you go to buy groceries, this bill will increase your taxes because you're probably going to take your car so that you can fill up with your groceries for the week. When you turn 16 and you're very excited about getting your first job, and you're going to drive to be a lifeguard or to bag groceries, your taxes are going up. Because no matter how much St. Paul takes, the Democrats are willing to take more. This is a tax on every Minnesotan who gets up and goes to work in the morning and comes home at night and takes the kids to ball practice. Every Minnesotan is going to feel the pain of this. And let's remember, members, we have a surplus. And if you read the report released at 11 a.m. 2/27 of this year, on the left-hand side, cheaper oil reduces capital expenditures in oil-related industries. Oil-related industries, that's gasoline, members, which the Democrats are taxing today. And the sentence following says, it allows consumers to divert spending towards non-gasoline purchases. So all the places you've been spending that money, members, it's coming to St. Paul. That's why I'm voting no.
This bill on this floor today is a signal to all of Minnesota that the Democrat leadership in the Senate intends not only to spend the entire surplus, but also to tax Minnesotans $1.9 billion to add $1.9 billion in permanent spending to our budget. Those funds come from gas taxes, raising $787 million out of the pockets of Minnesota families and businesses to pay these gas taxes, 16.5 cents. As Senator Peterson said, this would make us the third highest in the nation. In addition, $600 million in metro area sales taxes. That's 3/4 of a cent across the entire metro area, plus an additional 1/4 cent over the objections of the residents of Carver and Scott County by force. 1 cent across the Twin City metro area, that's going to hurt Minnesota families. It's going to hurt businesses. $191 million more will come out of the Minnesotans' pockets for vehicle registration taxes and valuation on their cars. The Minnesota Democrats, they want $90 million more for vehicle transaction filing fees, a $10 surcharge. They want another $24 million out of your pockets for motor vehicle title transfer surcharges. Members, all of these taxes are regressive. What that means is they are imposed on the poorest of the poor, and they hit poor Minnesota families harder than anybody else because it's a much larger portion of their income and it's a much larger portion of the value of their vehicles. Members, make no mistake, this is a tax on the poorest of poor Minnesotans.
We in the minority, we don't often win very many votes. We don't get a chance to really have a large effect on some legislation, but many times when we have bills, we offer ideas, we offer things to try to make a bill a little bit better in hopes that we can have some bipartisanship in the final passage of the bill. We took a hard look at this transportation bill, and we came to the conclusion that you just can't fix it. You just can't fix it. There's no amendment that you could offer to this bill that would fix it unless you completely redid the bill. And frankly, redid the bill along the lines of what we've seen happen in the other body, where they have put together a package of financing that doesn't rely on another tax, is just as sustainable, accomplishes just as many good things for the people of the state, but has the great virtue of not adding an additional tax on the backs of the people of the state of Minnesota, has been pointed out by many members here today. A tax that hits the poorest Minnesotans the hardest and ramps up as economic conditions get more difficult when gas prices rise. I think one of the things that's interesting about this debate, and you have on your desk, I think, a copy of a letter that the Chamber of Commerce distributed. And you might remember a few years ago, the last time we had a debate on gas taxes, and it was a pretty contentious debate. And in fact, there was a governor's veto that was overridden. You might remember that. And one of the organizations involved in that debate was the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, and they supported that gas tax increase. And there were many who thought that that would happen again this year as we had another debate on gas taxes. But if you look at the letter, you'll see that they don't. And for some of the very reasons that were mentioned in the debate today. They talked about how the price of gas, the low price of gas, was one of the things that has fueled the economic recovery that we have seen. Even though it may not be robust, there's no question that lower gas prices have a significant impact on people's home economies. And when gas prices go up, that hurts. And when you add on top of it a gas tax that rises, that's going to have even a more detrimental effect. The other thing I think that is interesting that their chamber letter points out is the fact that this solution is broadly opposed by people of this state. They mentioned a couple of surveys they did that showed 55 to 57% of the people of Minnesota say this is not the way to solve our transportation needs. We do not need to add another $2 billion of taxes. It's likely to go up as prices of gas go up. This is not how you do it. We had in the last biennium a $2 billion tax increase. $2 billion of taxes that had to be raised in order to balance the budget. We now have a $2 billion surplus. That must be just a coincidence. And now we're seeing another $2 billion tax increase being proposed to accomplish some needed infrastructure improvements, but they don't have to be accomplished with another tax, as has been shown in the bill in the other body. So it's disappointing to us on this side of the aisle to go through this and look at this kind of bill being proposed. I don't think this bill is going to go anywhere. I don't think the people of the state of Minnesota want this bill to go anywhere. I'm not getting a lot of mail. In fact, I'm not getting any mail from people saying, yes, we really need a higher gas tax. Please put a higher gas tax on something that's fundamental to all our economies. I haven't gotten those letters. Maybe you have. I have not. So I think as we think about this bill, I think it demands a no vote. It doesn't mean that we've given up on the idea of funding transportation. It does allow us to maybe take a fresh look at the kind of changes, kind of innovations, kind of proposals that the House has offered. I hope when we see this bill again, and I trust we will, I hope we will. I hope we see a transportation bill this year. And I hope what it is a dedicated funding that does not rely on a new tax, but relies on dedicating taxes that we currently have that are transportation related, as the House bill does. That is an innovative solution That is something that will provide needed funding to transportation. So I am optimistic that we will see a chance for this body to really enact transportation infrastructure funding that makes sense. But this bill does not make sense. And so I guess those of you who are going to vote for it, good luck. Good luck explaining this to your constituents. Good luck explaining this to people of Minnesota. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to any of us on our side. We don't think it makes sense to the people of Minnesota. And we hope that this bill will not pass today. So, members, I would urge a red vote.
I like the use of the word war because this bill is a war. It's a war on the kinds of congestion that we're facing. It's a war on our lack of investment that have occurred over 30 years, despite the little bump that we got about 7 years ago. It's a war on potholes, and it's an effort to invest in shared prosperity across this state. Make no apologies for this bill. We know from what I said earlier that business pays a huge premium. We either make some rational investments up front, or we pay later in lost opportunity, we pay in congestion, we pay in the inability to get to the things that are important in our lives. Madam President, I don't aspire at all to what the House has put before the state of Minnesota and the people of Minnesota for transportation. In order to do what they're doing, they're taking from general fund resources that we would otherwise be using for our senior citizens in health care and education. They have over $1 billion that they're cutting from the poorest and sickest Minnesotans in health care and human services, the youngest. You want to talk about a war on poor people and the most vulnerable and the most needy? That's a war on the most vulnerable and the most needy. And what are they doing? They're putting that in the transportation bill. You know what? We've read this book before. This legislature has tried to put general fund dollars into transportation in the past, and you know what's happened? The next year it gets taken right out. Right out. So Senator Hann is incorrect when he says this is a sustainable plan that the House is putting before us. It is exactly the opposite. What we do in transportation is we dedicate reliable, ongoing, sustainable resources so that we can plan for a long-term horizon, so that businesses and communities and people can invest in their lives and know that their ability to get to the places and people getting to their jobs and their work sites, and businesses can get goods and services to market, and construction companies can invest in mobilizing a workforce and in the intensive capital investments they need to make to build those roads and bridges over the long haul. That's what sustained investment in transportation looks like. And we fail to do that, we pay. We pay because other states become more competitive, and they're making those investments. State after state, controlled by Republican governors and Republican legislatures, are raising their gas taxes, are raising sales taxes in their metropolitan areas, because they know that those are investments that have a return on the dollar, and they know that they'll pay anyways in a loss of opportunity, in congestion, in lack of shared prosperity. That's the alternative. That's what the House puts before us. They don't invest in education. Less than 1% on the formula. That's how they get to their transportation plan. Is that the trade-off that we want? We know that if we were to go down the path of the House, as soon as there's any downturn, as soon as there's any competition for those resources in the general fund, they'll be slipped right out of transportation in a hot second. Because, of course, children and seniors, education, health care, safe communities, taking pressure off the property tax, those are our priorities. This bill, as a matter of fact, does do that. It provides the resources to those local units of government, our counties, our townships, our municipalities, that otherwise are going to tremendous effort through the property tax and still not keeping up with the infrastructure that they need. This is over 90% of our roadway system. The state highways bear the brunt of the traffic, but most of the mileage is supported by our local units of government. We read in the newspaper on Sunday, we're losing young people from this state, the millennials. Why? Because they're going to places that offer a quality of life and the kind of amenities and the transportation choices that they're looking for. We can't afford to lose those bright young Minnesotans. We can't afford to not attract more bright young people to this state if we're going to continue to compete. We have a gap in skills for jobs that are growing in this state. We have literally hundreds of people isolated in Minnesota already from being able to get to those jobs. That's not acceptable. This is an affirmative, positive investments that Minnesotans understand. And contrary to the claims, the way the gas tax is configured is counter-cyclical. So we look back on the price, average it out, and set it for the coming year, and very predictable.
The Secretary will close the roll. There being 36 ayes and 27 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to.